Is it okay for the church to get involved in the public arena? Should Christians be actively involved in the free elections of the United States of America? Faith Wins is an organization dedicated to engaging pastors, congregations, and Christians in the public arena. Why, you may ask? Because the influence of Christians needs to be felt around this country. Jesus is the solution, and we need to bring biblical solutions to the marketplace of ideas before it's too late, and we need to do it now. There are over 80 million eligible Christian voters in this country, but only 30 million regularly participate in the elections. This needs to change, and Chad Connelly is going to tell you why in just a minute. Check us out online at faithwins.us. That's faithwins.us. When we sit on the sidelines and hope for a better future, the enemy wins. When we mobilize, register, and make our voices heard, faith wins every time. Hey, thanks for tuning in today to the Faith Wins podcast with your host, Jim Brangenberg. And of course, we're joined today by founder of Faith Wins, Chad Connelly. Chad, you've always are on the road. You've been flying all over the place, talking to pastors all over the country on behalf of Faith Wins, trying to get pastors to have nonpartisan voter registrations in their churches the last 2 Sundays of September.
Yes, sir.
Chad, how's it going?
Man, it's going great. Let's see, since mid-July, I've now been in 7 states. I think I'm in a 21-day spot right here. I'll be in 9 different states speaking. I know that next week I have a meeting in D.C. I'm meeting with folks. I'm going to be in California. I'm going to be in Arizona. I'm going to be in Pennsylvania, back to Michigan, back to North Carolina, Georgia, and Ohio. And I think all that's by the first week of September. So it is a whirlwind time, but now's the time, man. As so many pastors have agreed with me these last few days, and every election matters, don't get me wrong. This is the most important election in our lifetimes. Your Christian values are under attack like never before. Your American values are under attack like never before. The idea of lawlessness and freedom are out there, and it's really a divided line, and maybe never been more clear how we ought to be voting as Christians, Jim.
So let's talk about that. What is our responsibility as Christ followers? What is our responsibility for furthering this place called the United States of America? Because there's so many voices out there, conservative and non-conservative, saying the trajectory of America is the current trajectory is in it's trouble. It's a troubled trajectory. We're off path where we need to be, and where we're heading is where we want to be.
Yeah. You know, I'm an eternal optimist. I am totally an eternal optimist. So I believe God's got a plan. You know, we talked about my story. I've watched God work in my life. Even in the worst times, I believe God's got a plan. And I believe the fact that he's got you here and me here and all of us that are watching and listening means he's got a plan and a purpose for us. So I think the responsibility is when stuff happens that we're worried about, concerned about, maybe even, fearful of if we're not careful, the responsibility that we have is, okay, God, what do you have for me? We are here in an Esther 4:14 moment. We're here, and who knows, we've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. We're in that such a time. I believe our obligation is to be salt and light. I believe that we're to follow the words of Jesus. There's no question. The only thing that's really going to fix people in the long term of their lives is Jesus. And unless you change people from the inside out with the saving grace of the knowledge of Jesus' substitutionary sacrifice on the cross for your life, and you give your life to him, you're not going to be changed. No amount of outside external force is going to change somebody. I met a guy yesterday in one of the pastor meetings I did, Jim, and he came up to me and he said, "Thanks for doing what you're doing." And I said, "Where are you from?" And he told me he was from a big city in a certain state that I will be in later. And we got to talking, and I said, "What brought you here?" And he said, "Just the Lord." And he said, "I was a gangbanger. I was running drugs. I was shooting at people. I was getting shot at. I was a drug addict, been in and out of prison. And my wife, I met a girl. I came down to here, and she was going to church, and she finally, just by her example, got me going to church. And I heard a sermon, and I decided that I was going to go to hell without Jesus. I walked forward and gave my heart to him. That was 22 years ago. And he just told me his whole story. And so internal change is the only way we really change. Our obligation, though, as believers, if you read Matthew 5, salt and light verses, I think it's 13 to 16, we are to be salt and light. It says if we're not salt, that we're good for nothing, to be trodden under the feet of men, thrown to the streets, trodden under the feet of men. I don't know about you, but as a Christian, I don't want to stand before the Father one day and be told I was good for nothing. And I believe when God puts a call in our lives, that's our responsibility to answer it. And when our passion intersects an opportunity, I think we found our mission. And so that's kind of where I'm called into this. You know, wasn't my idea to be in politics. I trained as an engineer, went in the Army. I was a tank officer. I loved my time in the military. I loved America, though, and the way I got involved with politics was, how do we give back? How do we keep this thing called freedom? You know, it's a special thing, this deal called freedom. Thomas Paine wrote in his book, Common Sense, in 1776, only heaven knows the price of its goods, and if such a celestial article as freedom weren't highly valued, it'd be lowly esteemed. And so here we are. We've got to have high value on our freedom. And if we're going to be salt and light, and we believe in a biblical worldview, and we're preaching and teaching and believing the whole counsel of God, then how do we not be salt and light in politics and the governmental arena? How do we not lend and permeate the culture with our Christian beliefs? How do we not go vote? If I'm a pastor, how do we not hold a nonpartisan voter registration drive? God's blessed us to be in a free country. And you know, one thing about America, as goes America, so goes the world. And more missionaries, more humanitarian aid, more freedom spread around the world. It came from this little place called America because of this idea called freedom. And of course, that's a biblical idea. As Paul said, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. Well, we know that's liberty in Christ. And he's given us the liberty in our heavenly kingdom and on our earthly citizenship here in America. We ought to exercise it.
The founding fathers understood all of this. The founding fathers were godly men who put everything on the line in order to establish this country. They all put everything on their line, their lives, their fortunes, whatever they had. But they understood this, that freedom was always going to be at stake, that there was always going to be an attack on freedom. But they were really a bunch of ordinary guys, weren't they, Chad, that just put everything on the line? How do we gather a bunch of ordinary people together today to accomplish the same thing?
You know, I believe talking to them and sharing and letting them hear your story, there's no substitute. Scholars now say that maybe 3% of the colonists were ardent in their determination to have freedom. The others, they follow leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. So if you're a pastor or deacon or a Sunday school teacher, you know, I'm not a pastor, but I am a deacon and a Sunday school teacher in my church. I feel an obligation, a burden to spread the word. You know, maybe we ought to do a podcast too about some of the things we're reading and books we ought to be studying as Christians to propagate and teach and spread the word to people, because they just don't know, Jim. They're spending too much time watching television. They're not careful about what goes in their gates, their ears, and their eyes. They're choosing things that are not biblically oriented, that aren't biblical worldview sources, and they're reading it, they're believing it, they're buying into it. And so our obligation as Christians is we've got to tell the story. You know, I think in an off year next year, I'm going to be talking to my donors and supporters and saying, look, let me go speak. And I want to do a new Selling America, why this place is special, and make those tie-ins for Christians. I think we've kind of lost it. Look, in a lot of ways, I feel like our school system has failed us, or, you know, maybe it's succeeded beyond somebody's wildest imaginations. The push for humanism, for humanist secularism, for the idea that man is good and I got all the answers, that's out there strongly. And we got to get back to a biblical worldview, because our rights, our freedom, our idea of America is tied directly to our ability to self-govern and to execute those rights.
It's amazing, the attack constantly on our freedoms. You know, 244 years ago, our country was formed, and it stood as a beacon of light to nations, as you mentioned. Yeah. All of the freedom that we see on the globe has been inspired by what's going on in the United States of America, and so many good things have been done, but it's been changing. How does Faith Wins fit in all this as we talk about our responsibility for furthering the experience called the American experience, the United States of America? How does Faith Wins fit into all of this and holding nonpartisan voter registrations in a church?
Well, I think it's relationships. I told those pastors in all those cities, and I'll tell the ones I'm going to next, that it's your relationships. Every one of them knows 5, 10, 25 pastors that I don't know. And if they'll share our materials, they've got access to all sorts of stuff. There are a lot of organizations that are doing bits and pieces of educating Americans and trying to revitalize and trying to energize them into action. But if they'll just spread the word that the materials we're giving out, it's good stuff. I'm so proud of my team for putting together information like they have, for making the resources like the Pastor's Toolkit available, for doing voter registration drives, the videos we've done that are available, everything for free for people. And we just feel like our role is to be one of those pieces of the puzzle to help them fill in the gaps and figure out some of the things maybe they're missing right now. But absolutely, I believe with all my heart that every pastor in America should, could, and absolutely legally is able to run a nonpartisan voter registration drive in their church to maximize the Christian vote. And honestly, Jim, I don't understand why a pastor wouldn't do that. I don't understand an argument. It just seems really weak to me if a pastor would say, well, I can't run a nonpartisan voter registration drive. And if they hide behind the pulpit or hide behind the idea of it's political, I'd like to find the part in the Bible that tells them not to do that. I'd have to see that. I hadn't seen it. What I see is virtually every book of the Bible, it's God's people talking to, with, or about government influence in their lives or government leaders who are impacting their lives. It's no different today. We've got to get involved.
Well, and the bottom line is 50 years ago, maybe they could hide behind the pulpit, but today you hide behind that pulpit, it's not long and you won't have a pulpit.
I literally had a pastor, I don't know, a week or two ago now, tell me that if they ever come for our religious freedom, then that's when I'll stand. And I said, sir, all due respect, that's the lamest line I've ever heard from a pastor. Dear God, bless your heart, buddy. If you won't stand up when there's nobody coming for your freedom, then you want me to believe or your people to believe you're going to have the guts to stand up if they actually come for your freedom? There's a great story. You probably read Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas, and he tells the story of Germans in their churches on Sunday hearing the trains go by, clackety clack, clackety clack. And they knew that the Nazis were taking Jews to the concentration camp. And you know what they did? They sang louder. They sang louder. And when pastors tell me they won't get involved now, to me, they're just singing louder. They're just singing louder, hoping it doesn't come to them. And yet I'm looking at my friends. You might have seen the state of Nevada forbade gatherings in church of more than 50, but because of the COVID, right? But a casino could be 50% full. So they had a gathering in a casino and had thousands of people. Stayed within the guidelines. It's stupid overreach and regulation by godless politicians. That's the reason we ought to be involved. It's like in California. I've got buddies. A lot of people saw John MacArthur. Some people have seen my buddy, Pastor Rob McCoy. They're being told to shut down by the government, by the same people who are out marching and protesting, screaming, yelling with people who are being criminals. That's okay, but boy, don't go to church. That's awfully dangerous. We're being lied to, Jim. We're being lied to, and it's a control feature. It's what every dictator throughout history did and tried. The difference is Americans are going to stand up and say, enough's enough. I've had it. We're going to stand up for truth. We're going to put out accuracy, and we're going to worship our Lord the way we see fit.
And it's time. They've got to do it now. Because if the pastor doesn't think that his religious liberties are in danger now, what in the world will it take? I mean, you got pastors holding church on the beach because their buildings are closed. I mean, come on. It's crazy. All right, let's talk about that pastor's toolkit, because these resources online, I'm looking at the page, church do's and don'ts, how to conduct a voter registration drive, voter registration resources by state, video resources for Civic Sunday. Talk to us about it. What is missing on that website that they need in order to be able to hold a nonpartisan voter registration drive?
Well, obviously, we've been beginning to post more and more as we got closer to the time. We didn't want to, have it out there and people forget. And of course, with the COVID stuff going on, some of them weren't even back in church yet. We wanted to provide everything we can think of. Jim, I've been doing this in churches for over 10 years now. I've been speaking in churches for 25 years. I've been speaking at pastor conferences for 25 years. I have gotten dozens of pastors from multiple denominations to give me input. What do you need? What would help you? And those are the resources we've created. It's come from pastor input who helped me pull those tools together and the resources to make it free for everybody. Our donors have been just, I mean, it's so humbling. But I think they believe that the country's at stake. I told those pastors this week, for the first time in my life, I feel like the country's teetering between freedom and dictatorship, mob control versus freedom. And so we want to give all the tools we could think of. It's out there. My phone is full with emails and texts from pastors, phone calls. Hey, help me do this, help me do that. So we're available. I hope you're able to see the faithwins.us, but also myvoice2020.org leads you to everything you need to do to conduct voter registration in your church.
I'm looking at the state of Florida right now. I mean, it sends you to the registration site online or gives you the PDF right there that you can print out. Everything is right there. myvoice2020.org, myvoice2020.org. Chad Connelly, thank you, and thank faithwins.us for bringing these resources to the church.
Thanks, brother.
Remember that when you register to vote and you vote your biblical values, faith wins. Hey, thanks for listening to the Faith Wins podcast with Faith Wins founder, Chad Connelly. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, and I want to ask you to check out Faith Wins online at faithwins.us. That's faithwins.us. Your vote is needed and necessary, and we all need to learn to engage in our system of free elections right here in the United States of America. If you're not registered to vote, please take time to do so on your local county voter registration website and do it today. In an upcoming election, vote for candidates supporting biblical values and a biblical worldview. Until next time, remember, when Christians engage in the public arena, faith wins.